Uh, Good morning, everybody. You are welcome to the 15th CREI Lecture, which is being given by Professor Rajagopalan. He received his bachelor's in BTech in chemical engineering. I didn't know that. I'm a chemical engineer too. From IIT Delhi, postgraduate diploma from IIM Bangalore, and PhD from IIT Kanpur. He was the Chief Executive Officer of the Karnataka State Council for Science and Technology from 1982 to 1993 and was involved in managing innovations that addressed the problem of Karnataka. In 1993, he and his colleagues founded Technology Informatics Design Endeavor, TIDE, a non-profit development society, which focused on developing and disseminating technologies that were economically attractive, environmentally sustainable, and socially acceptable in rural areas of Karnataka. He was its chairman till 2007. For his work in TIDE, he was awarded the Ashoka Fellow. TIDE was awarded the International Green Oscar, the Ashton Award in 2008. Dr. Rajagopalan joined International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, as a professor in July 2008. His areas of interest include innovation dissemination, geographical information, which he started in India, was the first person to start that area in India, and urban mobility. He was founder, director of IIITB, Innovation Center, which aimed at incubating and promoting innovations in the area of information and communication technology. He retired from service of the Institute in June 2020 and continues to be honorary faculty. He leads MOSIP, that is his current project, Modular Open Source Identity Platform project since 2018. This platform, which helps countries to establish their digital identity program, is now being adopted by 11 countries. Since April 2023, he's also the chair of the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure at the Institute. The center focuses on empowering counties with knowledge, skills, and tools required to design, architect, and implement their DPI journeys. With that, Professor Rajagopalan, the mic is yours. Please go ahead.
Sab, if I may suggest that, can you project Professor Rajgopalan's face for at least a minute before going to the slides?
Oh, okay. Can you take off screen share for a second, Professor Rajagopalan?
Yeah. Thank you, Sab, for generous introduction. Let me start by saying why this project. Then we will know about what we have done in the last 5 years in this project. If you really look at it, that almost all countries in the world have some or other programs in delivering some service from government to people. It could be subsidized food grain, it could be scholarship to students, it could be old age pension, it could be health benefits, health insurance, but every country, whether rich or poor, have government to people program. Let's call it as G2P. In all these programs, there is an eligibility criteria. One of the eligibility is the person who receives that benefit must, in most countries, be citizen of that country, or in many countries, they can be either citizen or residents, but belong to that country. So how do we know for sure that person who is accessing the benefits is actually the correct person to whom the benefit has to go? So there is one question of finding out and authenticating a person who wants the benefit. And there is second problem that in lots of places, people cannot access benefit because they do not have appropriate ways of authenticating, and they basically depend upon intermediary, somebody recommending them for some benefit. And this kind of intermediary system has been seen across the world, leading to wastage, inefficiency, and a fairly large number of poor and especially women being left out of the government to people program. So in order to address that, one of the sustainable development goals of the UN, when countries adopted sustainable development goals 20 years ago, one of the goals was to provide some way by which people could assert their right to access government to people program. And that actually shaped into an identity system, saying UN advocated that there must be a way of identifying people so that they can authenticate themselves, and countries should implement an identity system and provide identity to citizens of the country. This was all in the first decade of the new millennium, and many countries started looking for digital identity system. By the year 2018, 60 plus countries had attempted to build national digital ID system, including India. India had one of the world's largest digital ID system called Aadhaar, and all of us are aware of that, which is a digital ID system. But more so in Africa, Latin America, other countries of Asia, every sub-Saharan African country has tried some or the other model of digital ID, but very few have been successful. The reason for that, most of the countries in a very conventional way went for a vendor-based solution. They will write an RFP, float a tender, and then award a contract as per their national procurement rules. If it is loan from World Bank, international procurement. But what it led is that one is that the solutions were proprietary from vendors, mostly from Europe and some from North America. So they were inflexible, and they were just a digital identity system given to the country in a silo and was not interoperable with other systems. Like, for example, if a bank wants to, with consent, get some information from digital identity to open a bank account, it was not possible. So you would find that there are lots of common needs. Identification and authentication, say for a bank, is same as for a telephone connection, is the same for school admission, is same for everything. But each department had its own solutions, and even for a common need like authentication of an identity, diverse solutions happen. And this resulted a very large number of inefficiencies. Systems were not working. Government burned their finger, and sometimes courts have intervened and even stopped the identity program because of lots of problems. And by the time the India had successfully implemented the Aadhaar system, and many countries of the world wanted to borrow from India and have an Aadhaar-like system for their country. For very strategic reasons, Government of India decided not to engage with countries and provide them with the expertise of Aadhaar. They said, no, we will not be able to do this. And so countries were left with not much help. At that time, a few of the donor agencies, you would see their logos here, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, NORA, Tata Trust, and Omedia Network at that time, along with the volunteer group in Bangalore called iSpirit and the World Bank, we had, and IIITB, we met in December 2017 and brainstormed to see what can we do. Many countries want identity platform and identity systems, but Aadhaar is not going to be made available. Can we build one? So that is how this project started. Right from the beginning, we said it is not going to be like Aadhaar, like closed source. Aadhaar is proprietary and closed source. Nobody knows what is the code inside and how it operates. It's not likely to be any other vendor solution. We said it will be a not-for-profit project at the IIIT Bangalore, and it will be in open source. And third, it will be modular so that countries can pick up the modules they like and configure it to fix into the country's needs. So we actually work on these principles. Our aim is eventually, using identity and authentication, people has to get their rightful benefits. They have to access what is due to them without any intermediary, and they should have the right-based approach for accessing some of the public goods which government might distribute or government might enable. So we actually, if you look at this pyramid, we actually configured or constructed MOSIP on this. We would have an open source code-based platform. We will write the code and put it in the open source, but every component will also be based on open standards, so anybody else could also develop, build upon it, etc. On top of this platform, in order that people obtain benefit, that would be a data exchange layer so that a bank can get some data so that they can open an account. A ration shop can get some data so that it can provide free food grain or subsidized food grain. A hospital can access some data so that it knows that this person is eligible for free healthcare. So this data exchange, which is based on digital trust, based on user content, that provides mobility so the user can access the benefits from wherever he is or she is. And it also provides a very high level of privacy and security for the user. On top of this data exchange, others will build various platforms. Like, for example, somebody might build a food grain distribution application, somebody might build a payment of pension application, somebody might build. So many applications can be built, and that services is what people will consume. So what do? We provide the basic platform and the data exchange layer. We partner with countries. So we support countries in adoption of digital ID. We enter actually an MOU between the IIITB University and the country to support them for 3 to 5 years in their national journey for instituting a national digital ID. We build a robust ecosystem of commercial partners because in an ID system, if a country wants to capture biometric, you need those capturing devices. You need people who could configure it for the context-specific needs of the country. And you need people who could maintain it for year after year for the country. And so we need quite a bit of an ecosystem to run the national ID program. So we actually started building, developing, and nurturing such an ecosystem of commercial partners on whom the government can depend on after we withdraw from the program. And we also work with academic partners in research and other collaboration because lots of areas in ID is still under standardization as well as in research. So we work with institutions like CMU, both at Pittsburgh and Kigali. We work with Turing Institute in London. My own colleagues in the institute work on research projects. We also work with other institutions like UM6P in Marrakesh, near Marrakesh, work with Addis Ababa, now started working with them, and work with the University of Philippines at Manila. So what are the design principles? So the first is privacy and security is built into the system. It is secure and private by design. It is not an afterthought. It is not a wrapper around an application to provide security. It is built into every module of the MOSIP platform. We use secure devices for collection of biometric or other such, or printing of the ID card. And what we call it as a L1 secure devices, I will come to that later. And for data processing and data storage, we actually use the zero knowledge architecture in most of these modules. Second, it is open source using open standards. It's available in GitHub. People could examine, students could download, put it up in their thing and actually try to find any security flaws or try to hack or do something. Or they can build applications on top of MOSIP. It is independently scalable. We are not a monolithic system, it's modular. Each of the modules can scale independently. We have tested it for 100 million population. Why we chose 100 million population for test? Most of the countries with whom we work and we might work have population around that region. Philippines is 106 million population, Ethiopia is 117 million population. There are few countries in the world which have got more than 100 million population. So we have tested it for 100 million and it works well. Philippines has actually, as of today, has issued 80 million identity cards based on this system. It is modular, independent, interchangeable, and completely API-based implementation. It is configurable by the country, easy personalization and configuration. But we also have a module for managing the entire system, which would provide easy auditing, monitoring, testing, and whenever there is an upgrade, to automatically upgrade the system. So if you really look at what are the major modules, there are lots of minor modules, but the major modules are, first is a pre-registration. A person can provide login, create his account. It could be on a kiosk, it could be on a cell phone, or it could even be by visiting a center, and book an appointment for actually providing the data to the government. And in case the government wants some biometric, to provide that biometric. Second process is the registration. We have both online and offline mode, because in some countries, some of the locations are very remote, connectivity is very poor. So we have an offline mode of registration. And we have currently provided facility for 3 biometric collection: fingerprint, all the 10 fingers, iris capture, both the eyes, and the face photograph. But we are also experimenting with palm as a biometric, and also non-contact palm reading, and also voice as a biometric. But they are still experimental, and they are in some kind of a laboratory test. And over a period, we might be able to get those 2 also into the biometric, and countries could choose what they want. And third is, after collecting the data is examined, deduplicated, so that if the person already has a identity, he is not given one more identity. And so we then provide an identity number. But most countries would also want to provide an identity card. Like Aadhaar has an identity card or an identity slip. Most countries want it into some kind of a credit card size card. So we have that, what we call as credential issuance. We have programs in which such kind of cards could be printed and dispatched to the people. People could download their ID as a QR code onto their mobile phone. So that's also a possibility, and people could use just that QR code for authenticating. We have the authentication module because ID is as good as it can be used. And for using, you need to authenticate. We can authenticate based on demographic details or biometric. Authentication services would be either yes or no. One question is this person the same as whom he claims to be? That is yes or no. And we also provide for eKYC service, know your customer service, where a user can actually consent to share more than this yes or no, maybe his name, address, date of birth, phone number, maybe. Some data which is available with the system, we could share for a very specific time or for a specific purpose, or with a specific organization for a specific time for a specific purpose. So we have that kind of a module by which person can say, yes, share my name and date of birth only, or something like that. And that could be shared with the other organization, whom we call as relying parties. Resident services is a service which is available to the citizen, by which he or she can lock the credentials so that it is not available for any use, or generate credentials on demand, the sense that I am just going somewhere, I have to authenticate, I can generate a QR code and show it to them. And by scanning the QR code, they can authenticate me. And we have the partner management. I was talking about 2 kinds of relying parties. One is the parties who provide data. That is, when you authenticate, you might authenticate by showing your face to a camera, or a fingerprint, or iris camera, etc. So these are parties whose devices capture this and provides to the system for authentication. That is one set of relying party. The other set of relying party is a bank or a telco or a government ration shop or PDS shop, who would need some authentication so that they can provide the service. So we have a module in which you can admit, remove, configure relying parties, and also audit relying parties transaction. And we also have the policy for KYC and data share. Yeah. So if you really look at MOSIP, we started by the time we could get all the grants in place, etc., it was August 2018. And August 2018 was also the time when Morocco actually signed with us on an MOU that they will use MOSIP. I must admit here, admire Morocco because they signed up with us even before we wrote one line of code. They had such confidence with us. They visited Bangalore, talked to us, and they signed with us saying, yes, we will use MOSIP. Within 11 months, we had an open source code for all these modules, which we called as 0.9 because it was just a beta version of the code. And we had to test a lot. As I said, 100 million is the kind of load test that we did. And that took a few months more. And by February 2020, we had the 1.0 general availability version. July, we had 1.1 based on some feedbacks from Morocco and Philippines, which was the other country which started working with us. And last year, we stabilized the entire system. And after many versions on 1.1, we reached 1.20, and we call it as long-term support. We feel that this 1.20 would survive till maybe 6-7 years, and it would be able to provide countries with a stable platform. And then we started releasing modules on top of MOSIP so that countries can make use of it. One is the application called Inji, which works on mobile phone, both Android and iOS, by which a person can download the credential and store it in the mobile phone and use it for authentication. So it is a kind of a credential wallet where one could choose to store the ID credential, not necessary to carry the camera. And it also is a system by which offline authentication can be done. The relaying party, let's say you are walking into a public food grade distribution system and that person has no connectivity. This used to be a complaint with Aadhaar. Poorer woman would go and they won't get grain because they are not able to authenticate, and lots of complaints against Aadhaar was on this authentication because the villagers it will not. So, but here what we did was that in Inji you download this credential which is in the form of a QR code. The store provider or the service provider, be a bank or telco or a ration shop, can just scan that QR code and your face would appear as it is there in the credential, and he can verify by himself by looking up at the person. Or also there is an algorithm for face matching. If he can take a picture of the person standing in front of him, the algorithm will also say whether it is the same face or different face. So we did this in G. It's available on most of the Android phones. We are also working on a way by which people who do not have smartphones, because in Africa, almost 50% of the country does not have a smartphone. They all use the old feature phones. And so feature phone, we are trying to use USSD features in some way by which same kind of offline authentication is possible. So that is one module that we have released after this year, early this year. The other module is e-signet, which is essentially to signing into certain services using identity instead of a normal login and password. So like, for example, you could use Google or Facebook or Microsoft for signing into any other services. If I want to read my Google credentials. But what we are now trying to do is that people could sign on into any service, including government services, by using their ID profiles, ID credentials, rather than username and password. And that could be authenticated and people could use that. So that e-signet was also released recently, and some countries have shown interest into that. So if you really look at how many countries we have reached, this list will be 11. Actually, 12th country is. Really look at the population of the countries who will eventually receive some kind of identity based on the system, that would be close to 400 million people. And we already have 95 million registrations done on across 11 countries. These are the locations of the countries. Shortly, we might have some countries in Latin America also using MOSIP. 3-4 of them are testing it in many places. So At least I hope 2 of them will start using it quickly. So this is the kind of graphs you would see how it's moving. So I talked about creating that ecosystem. So we now have more than 80 people who are MOSIP compliant. So certain device manufacturers who manufacture a fingerprint scanner or an iris scanner or a fingerprint reader or a face camera, we have something known as L1 standards. We have published it, and a company wants to meet L1 standards, we help them by allowing them to use a sandbox to testing their electronic hardware design. Then L1 is actually a standard in which the information is encrypted in the device itself, so that even if the device is hacked, it's not going to show the information. It will be encrypted information. It is encrypted at collection, and in the device, it is encrypted in the flight, and it is encrypted in the server storage. So you would find that 60 plus countries have gone through this program, and they have tested their devices, they have got it certified, and they are available for countries to make use. So if a country has to procure, let's say, 5,000 fingerprint scanners, they have now 20 or 30 countries from whom they can procure. Similarly, we have system integrators, many of them, some international companies, some Indian companies. And for example, Morocco uses ETOS, Philippines uses MSP, Ethiopia doesn't use any SI, they themselves are building the system. But there are so many of them are available system integrators. So countries can happily go and use any one of these system integrators. So what is our focus? Our focus is, we started with ID issuance and ID lifecycle. Then we are slowly moving on to enabling ID usage. And we are working on standards. For example, there has been no standard for the biometric of ID, of all the three. So we were able to convince IEEE to set up a special standard group for biometric standards for the ID. Similarly, we work with other international standard organizations for the purpose of creating standards for various modules. And we also do reference integration of some user application. For example, we don't work on civil registry, that is birth and death registration and marriage registration, etc. But there is a group called OpenCRVS who have a platform of civil registration in open source. We work closely with them so that we have integrated OpenCRVS with MOSIP. So a country who wants a civil registration and MOSIP together can always get that. In the sense, a child at birth will be assigned an identity number, though the biometric may be collected much later on. And some countries don't collect all the three biometrics. For example, Morocco doesn't collect fingerprint because fingerprint collection under their law can be done only by the police, not by the identity authority. Identity authority collects only biometric and face, but we use the fingerprint stored with the police database. They have a system called CNIE by which they have collected the fingerprints of the entire country. We use those fingerprints if somebody wants to authenticate using the fingerprints. And that is a beauty of interoperability, because our systems are open and API based. We can actually interoperate with any other system which has got such open interfaces. Fortunately, CNIE has such an open interface, which we are using that. Then we also have guidebooks, tools, and marketplace. Marketplace is a place where countries can discover who are the companies who have got what kind of skills, what kind of competence, etc. And we also have some use cases which we are working on. One is a cross-border usage, especially in Western Africa. This becomes important. 8 Western African countries are in the Common Economic Union, something like a European Union. They have a common currency. And these 8 countries also permit workers to migrate from one country to another country and find work. So we are basically looking at ID issued in one country, how it could be used in another country, either for opening bank account or getting a SIM card or for any other purpose. So that we demonstrated recently on 4th of October. We had deputy governors and directors from the central banks of all these 8 countries, and we demonstrated how MOSIP could be used for cross-border verification authentication. Similarly, for many number of G2P benefits, we recently demonstrated in Philippines a program by which government can provide a QR code based voucher for poor people to get free treatment in hospitals or medicines in the drugstores. And we focus on interoperability and on sustainability. Sustainability in terms of platform maturity and technology determinants. So these are our approach. We establish beachheads with reference implementation and integration for new platform and version, evolve standards, and add features based on requests from country and our own learning in the field. In fact, that NG and e-signet and all are the outcome of strong requests. In fact, currently we are testing what is known as selfie authentication because there is a strong request for that from Morocco because they have a old age pension program where they have to provide selfie authentication, life certificate, etc. So we are testing some features like that. And we work on inclusion, access and security and privacy. We collaborate with people who look at design of computing system and then evaluate whether it's inclusive, whether it is gender inclusive and whether it is socioeconomic inclusive. We work with Professor Burnett in the Oregon State University and her team on inclusivity. We work with Alan Turing Institute and on trustworthy digital ID. And we work with CMU on security. And we also encourage and support the community in learning, contribution, and building solutions. And we have, this is a kind of stack we have developed. You have MOSIP at the core. You have NG, which is a credential wallet and aggregator. And then you have eSignet. These are all offering of the MOSIP platform. Then we can integrate with OpenCRVS platform for civil registration and the OpenGTP platform for beneficiary management and benefits delivery. Incidentally, OpenGTP is also developed at the Institute. It's a platform that is being offered by the Institute. And we are working, the same team is actually handling both. I would stop here. Here is a QR code which you could scan for going to GitHub or other documentation, etc. I would be happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Okay. I think Harsha Krishna, you wanted to ask a question. Please go ahead.
Hi. Thank you very much, Professor. Again, I have a couple of questions. One, of course, I'm not going to question whether the quality of the code, given that it's coming from the institute. I'm just interested in two things. One is in the design of the digital trust component in the IDE, because as I see it, fundamentally, it's a question of, do I trust in what is considered as this person? And from that component, do you think it would be more interesting to sort of also consider a socio-legal or a techno-legal approach? Because you're talking about whether this person really exists and a lot of other systems that are going to be built on top of it. So should, for example, once the authentication is done, will a log of that be usable in a court of law, for example? So should you also think about what will be the technical requirements placed on this system coming from the laws of the country that you are also sort of working with? And the second part of the question was, if such a system can work across a single country, do you think such a system can be applied to sort of refugees? If it is fast enough, then people can move because there is a lot of refugee movement in different parts of the world. And there is also benefit transfers by being, of course, there are ethical questions when it comes to tracking refugees, but if you are only looking at whether this person already exists and you don't sort of have identifying factors, this could also help us to understand or track refugee components. And finally, if I may, do you think you can replace the Aadhaar system with MOSIP instead? If the MOSIP system is much more transparent, I would rather have a a system where I can look at the code instead of something that exists behind government walls. Thank you.
So I would answer Karsha. 3 questions. First question was on the possibility of having a techno-legal framework so that one could use it in a court of law. Every country has its own act or a rule or a framework of rules for governing digital ID. Philippines actually started with an act passed in the parliament in 2019 before they went into digital ID. Morocco actually enacted after they signed the MOU with us, but before actually rolling out the program, they took 2 years to see whether what kind of a agency should be set up, and they have evaluated our code for GDPR compliance, whether we are compliant with GDPR regulations, and then Privacy Commission had to examine to see whether privacy laws of Morocco is. So we are bound by the laws of that country. In some countries, the log should be deleted 3 months. Within 3 months, you should not have any log of when was the system pulled, for what purpose, by whom. In India, Supreme Court has said 180 days, and Aadhaar should delete all records of logs within after that 180 days. But some countries have 90 days, so the logs may not be available. But what happens is that since the ID is issued under an enabling provision of an act or a government order, that ID itself is legally valid. But your question is whether my authentication on a particular day that could be submitted as an evidence in a court of law that I went to this place or something like that. That I am not sure whether you could do that, because we are bound by the ID enabling act of each country, whether that could be admissible evidence. Like, for example, if somebody has authenticated and obtained, let's say, a ration of few kilograms of rice at location X at time Y, can that information be provided as an alibi in a criminal case where he has been accused of a theft or whatever? I'm not sure, but that is for each country to decide what kind of evidential value the ID authentication will have. It will come in the Evidences Act, and we are not at this juncture talking in terms of that. Your second question is with respect to trust. How is the system trusted and how it is that? We work at multiple levels in building trust. One is, as I said, we build on the zero knowledge architecture. The system does not have a memory. At every time of transaction, the device, the person, and the application, all three have to be authenticated. That information is coming from a reliable device, the person is authenticated, and the application he is using, let's say for eKYC or for SRM authentication, that also comes from a signed application device. So we have, that is one way by which we can say that we build the trust into the system. Second, the consent management is completely in the user hand. And user could also examine all the logs of the usage when the information was shared with whom for what purpose within the window which the government law will provide. If the government says 90 days, within 90 days, the user can also transparently look at it. So we build that kind of thing. Actually, there is an interesting work by Alan Turing Institute on what does it mean to say trustworthy digital ID. They have got some 100-odd parameters to evaluate trustworthy digital ID. They have been evaluating MOSIP on all those parameters in the last 1 year or so. 2 postdocs are working on it, and they seem to be quite happy. So, though their final paper is still not published, but they seem to be quite happy. So, in fact, they have an annual conference on trustworthy digital ID. So, you could see the papers that are posted. Your other question was with respect to refugees. We have been working with UN High Commissioner for Refugees, because refugees have got 2 problems. One problem is refugees who run away from a country because of persecution, whether it is religious persecution or whether it is some other kind of persecution, do not want any information about them available in any system which can be hacked. Because they will say that that country's person can find out where I am, and he can trouble not so much this person has come away, but his family is still back in that country. So that family can be threatened. So people want to be anonymous and not really revealed to the. At the same time, they also want to access benefits from UN High Commission for Refugees, whether it is food grain or education, drinking water, medicine in the refugee camps. UN High Commission has a program currently which actually enrolls them only for that specific purpose. As a refugee, provides them with some identity and then does that. But UNHCR always have this problem of saying, is this person is a refugee or is it just somebody else from the local population who is coming and registering so that he can get some benefit? So that thing. So we are working on some ways by which we could, without having to make information available, whether we could do some kind of authentication possibility. We are still in the talk stage. And the last question, can Aadhaar be replaced? Technically, yes. But what I see is Aadhaar is also slowly opening up. There is a vision for Aadhaar 2.0. Aadhaar has started collaborating with us, interacting with us, at least in the standard space and some sharing of knowledge in the last 1.5 to 2 years. And we find that there is a desire among the Aadhaar also to become more transparent. Though I don't think they'll put the code on the open. That will not happen. But there may be various other ways in which you would find how the system works. But that is for Government of India to decide.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Shyam, you have some thoughts?
Let me.
Yeah.
Yes, Professor Rajpalan, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation and the work of spreading this open platform system across countries of the world. Could I ask, suppose a country X wants to implement or develop such a system for their use, is it possible to give some idea of how much will it cost them? I know it will depend on the size of the country and features of the program and so on. But can you share some information about the resources needed, both money and trained personnel, administrative setup, government legislation? What kind of resources would be needed from a country who wants to work with you to implement or develop a system for themselves?
So the software itself, the platform itself is open source, licensed under MPL 2.0. So there is no cost involved. There is also no cost involved for our technical support, which we sign for 3 to 5 years. We have a team which goes to the country, which works with the country's people and trains them. So capacity building, training, support for 3 to 5 years, and the system itself, these are all free. But countries have to spend on a few things. First of all, if they want to collect biometrics, they have to procure biometric devices. So there is some cost involved. Like for example, Philippines wanted to set up 5,000 stations because they want to cover the entire country, let's say in 18 months. So how many stations will be required? So they needed to buy 5,000 sets of biometric device capture. So that is one cost of that. Second cost is most of the countries do not want to store any one of these data or application in the cloud. There is the issue of data sovereignty, and so they would want an on-prem solution. And so they have to build an on-prem infrastructure, that is the servers and the network connectivity to the servers, firewalls, and all that they have to. Some countries have got a government on-prem structure, so they put it into that, but some countries do not have, so they have to set up an on-prem structure. So there is some considerable cost on that. Third is there is a cost of people because every registration station has to be manned by one person. Then there has to be a person maintaining the systems. Then there are persons who would operate, troubleshoot, and a whole lot of other things, configure and customize to their country needs. And quite a bit of such work is involved. So what normally happens is that these are all sometimes provided by a vendor, a system integrator who brings his staff and helps the country, or sometimes it's a local government staff. Both are possible, and a mix is also possible. Some government staff and some vendor-based stuff. What we have seen is that a country of the size of about 50 million population, the life cycle cost of this, that is initial cost as well as maintaining it, evolving it with our newer patches, etc., over 5-6 year period, would be at about $17-18 to $20 per person. So, for example, Morocco, I think the project size is $130 million or something for a population of 40 million, including all the costs for 5-6 years. So you would have that. As the population goes smaller, the population larger, the cost comes down. For example, in India, it is under $1. You know, the whole other cost is under $1 life cycle cost. But as the population, and some of these costs are essentially because of the stuff which is not actually needed, but countries want a very good looking PVC card on which a nice photo is printed, etc., because you don't need it, but they want the card, and cards sometimes themselves cost $3 per card. So you have to add those costs and card printing and all. As countries become smaller, the cost even shoots up. In fact, we have gone, I think one of the countries which is 20 million, 14 million population, the cost went to $70-80 per capita. And in fact, we are trying to find out, there are 50 countries in the world which has population less than 1 million. And some of them have approached us. Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad has approached. SVG Islands with a population of 125,000 has approached. Bermuda with a population of 72,000 has approached. Belize with a population of 425,000 has approached. The cost for them in the conventional way will be pretty high. It might even go up to $150, $200 per person. But we are trying to get them convinced, saying that why don't you use cloud solutions so that it becomes cheaper for you, and also work in the ways in which you might collect a fewer biometrics, have a smaller data footprint, and also talk in terms of basically, in case you are much worried about data sovereignty, we are trying to argue with them that you could store data locally, but have compute and processing on the cloud so that the data storage is normally the lower cost. A few terabyte of data you might store. So we are working on some of the modality and also to look at the ways by which we can bring down the cost for smaller countries, but that is still work in process. So as I can see, currently we are operating anywhere between $20 to about $150, depending upon the size of the population.
If I may, I'll just follow up and ask, how about financing of the operations and assistance and support from CREI Bangalore? How's that being financed?
Pardon, sir? I didn't hear you. What?
How is CREI Bangalore support operations for this project being financed?
We are completely dependent currently on philanthropic support.
Okay.
We don't have any government grant from Government of India or any other government. Our work support to countries, support ecosystem partners, helping them with a sandbox so that they can test the devices or test their integration, training even their manpower and staff, training government manpower and staff, training university teachers, researchers and others. All of them are provided free. And this is completely based on the support we get from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Norwegian Agency for Development, which is a government agency, Norway's NORAD, and Tata Trust, Pratiksha Trust, which is of Chris Gopalakrishnan, and we have started receiving some funds from there is a newer organization called Co-Develop, so they are also supporting us. So it's completely philanthropic.
Okay.
as of now. There is no model to monetize it or to do that. That worry is there, saying if the philanthropic support stops, what do we do? But we are building such an ecosystem which would take it further, because now, as I said, 60 companies, other universities, others, their code is in the open. So it would then become something like Linux or, you know, MySQL or something like that. It might become something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Otherwise, I have a quick question. You had mentioned something when I talked to you some time ago that that you were also setting up training centers in many of these countries to be able to add additional features and to create a sort of a cooperative agreements between the countries who are using these systems as a way to share and enhance their own systems by sharing different kind of code. How is that done? And is there a sort of a general agreement through MOSIP to do this?
Yeah, what we do is we look for partners. Our preference is universities first, but it could be other non-profit. And we vet them with the government, because eventually government has to use them. So we vet them with the governments, and if governments also agree, not only for training and capacity building, also for setting up a sandbox, experimenting with newer features, creating an innovation hub around this, and creating an ecosystem for startups. So we work with that. That is what we are planning to do at Kigali. We are planning to do at UM6P, and that's what we started with Manila. First was a course that was offered to the students and faculty so that they get interested in it, a 4-credit course which goes towards their degree. Then a lab was set up and a sandbox. Now a full-fledged MOSIP experience center is coming up there. And we would work with that, and not only restricted to university, slowly other not-for-profit organizations are getting in touch with us. For example, there is an Africa-wide organization called Africa Nenda, which works in the government to people payment space. So recently they met us and wanted to see whether Africa Nenda could become one of those kind of partners. So we work with that. Currently, we try to also procure funds for those partners by talking to multiple philanthropies so that they can get directly funded. We also encourage them to obtain some funding. So we cannot provide funding from MOSIP due to Indian government laws and other stuff. But we do encourage them to seek funding, and we recommend them to other donors, etc. That's how it's happening. And we hope that Latin America, we are talking to UNRAF in Argentina, and we hope that we might have a center in every continent, at least 1 or 2 centers in every continent.
So do you also expect these centers to share their experiences, teaching materials?
Yeah, we have a country conversation once a year where countries also come and share their experiences. And there the centers and others also participate. We have a day for government, a day for industry who are our partners. We have a day for other partners, and everybody listens to everybody. And they also look at our future plan. What are we going to develop in the next 1 or 2 years? Whether they would like to adopt it or not adopt it, and things like that. So we have a country conversation. This year we held it in March in Bangalore for 4 days. Next year, 3rd week of February, we are having it in Addis Ababa for 4 days once again.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the audience? Please raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask the question. I'll give you 30 seconds to decide to ask the question. Otherwise, we can bring the lecture to...
If there are no questions right now, or you want to wait, let me ask one more question from Raj Palan. Early on, when Aadhaar was introduced, there were a lot of concerns, even lawsuits, Supreme Court cases, concerns about privacy, and of course, concerns about government will be able to collect taxes better. then it was able to without identification. Have you seen appearance of such issues in the countries you're working with?
See, yes, they do, because civil society is very active, and there is a section of civil society which feels that any kind of identity, digital identity, is bad by itself. And they throw up the examples of, France doesn't have a digital ID, England doesn't have a digital ID, US doesn't have a digital ID, though your social security number is used for everything else. So why is digital ID at all required? Don't have a digital ID, and they think it's also a kind of a conspiracy to profile, track people. So there is one huge group of civil society which argues from the very basic desirability of digital ID. Should I have? It's something similar to saying that should Google collect data? Will AI be helpful, or what does AI do? And there is always pros and cons, etc. There are others who do not question the need for identification, but talk in terms of saying, is this the only way? For example, there are people who question monolithic single server based identification, saying why not decentralize and do a decentralized ID, not store everything in single, because then the question of privacy hacking becomes problematic. Then others who are saying that why do we even store anything anywhere? Let the identity be verified and given, let it be in a very encrypted form, available with the people only in, like our QR code example, which I said. So if you can provide them with a QR code, then delete the records from the central repository, and people just use the QR code. There are many such arguments that are happening. Most of them come from this fear that ID, and especially biometric based ID, could be used to profile population and used for, in fact, there have been even cases in, I think, Nigeria, where they were also trying to collect some DNA. I don't remember whether it is Nigeria or Uganda. The Supreme Court has to step in and say, you have no right to collect DNA samples. And there are such fears are there. What we try to say is that this is for the governments to solve. Our thing is modular. You don't want biometric, don't collect biometric. Doesn't really matter. You can, since our code is open and modular, you can design the ID system the way you want it. And so we basically interact with the civil society, saying how we build various features and how it could answer some of their questions. The zero trust system, zero knowledge system that we are building, the modularity, the code being available in the open. We are saying that all these are there. So some of your fears could be reported. But this kind of a question between kind of a digital system versus a non-digital system will keep continuing. Early stages of Aadhaar, apart from the question of privacy and trust, I think Indians don't so much worry about privacy. They make many many photocopies of not only Aadhaar document, but also the ration card, driving license. Everybody has some multiple copies and don't mind giving it to everybody. But the question was that denial of service because somebody could not authenticate. That became a very big issue. So somebody goes to a ration shop and the fingerprint system is not working because network connectivity is not there. The storekeeper says network is not working, come tomorrow. Or saying that you are not authenticated because the fingerprint has eroded because of farmer, come tomorrow. Or I can't give it to you kind of stuff. Those became a major issue, saying that, you are denying rightful service to somebody just because they are not able to authenticate at that time in that mode. So various mechanisms have been developed even within Aadhaar to overcome that. Aadhaar has now got a mobile Aadhaar, the way we have QR code. Aadhaar has a QR code, so you could use that. Aadhaar has got a Aadhaar by which you could even do a live face authentication. In fact, that is what is being used to generate live certificate for pensioners from their home without any intermediary. So there are many things which Aadhaar itself has come in, but this criticism which was there at that time saying In Orissa, 2 people died because they couldn't get ration, and somewhere else, so many people. That continues and persists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for an excellent lecture, and I really think this projects India's software capabilities outside much more than any of our earlier efforts in the IT industry. And I thank you very much for doing this lecture. And let's hope that this continues and it propagates across many countries, and the experiences provide a certain amount of certain ability for India to be present in the IT world, all over the IT services world, in as many countries as they start getting adopted. Thank you so much. And with that,
Thank you,
we will...
Saab, and thank you all the participants.